So I received a comment on I think it was on the last video, or maybe a short that I made from the last video that said, it reminded me of a quote from Dave Chappelle. And it said, "You're not poor. Poor is is a mentality. You're broke." And there's a big difference there. And it's actually one that has become abundantly clear to me this morning as I have been doing research for another video that I'm going to put together on a different channel where I provide more news, updates, and stories about what's going on in the world and the current financial and economic landscape. The other thing is, I want to remind you guys that, or share with you in case you didn't know, the shorts that I put up are usually shorts created from clips of full videos. Therefore, for the full context of the video and the message, there's a link at the bottom. I don't even know if it really looks like a link. It's just some words that essentially take you to a related video. So if you see a short and you hear a clip, click on that at the bottom. It's usually like right around this area. And the reason I can tell, I got the grid line set up on my phone to give me thirds for proper composition for my video. So I have an idea of where a short would be. This may end up being a short, but click the link to watch the rest of the full video. Now, as I said, I was doing some research and I came across an article about Ford and their labor strike situation and how I think it was 8,700 more workers have walked out and they're in a standstill. There's no negotiations, there's no talks. And this is after yesterday having another conversation with my wife, Michelle, and she was telling me about one of the shows we would watch from time to time on HGTV. And I think it was Two Chicks and a Hammer. Might have been the name of the show, or at least that's the name of the company of the daughter and the mom who were running this construction renovation company. Might have been up north. I don't want to say Chicago because I think Windy City Rehab was Chicago and she's gone on to do a different show. But essentially, Michelle shared with me that this was the last season and the daughter, she just had a baby. She just had a kid and her first child, I believe. And she lost a lot of weight after that. And she's almost had like a complete makeover herself, like complete makeover, like how she does renovations and makeovers for property. Like she herself looked completely different. And either way, when I saw such a drastic change, I immediately had thoughts and opinions about why. And I think it has something to do with her future plans for her business, her life. And essentially, she has ceased her agreement to continue producing this television show. She has accepted a job offer from another company to become an employee, and she is no longer going to manage and operate the construction company because her mom has since retired. And she said herself, trying to provide for, I believe, 24 workers was too stressful for her and didn't allow her to live her life. So essentially she's going to close down or maybe sell the company, but she is freeing herself of that extremely heavy burden and mental responsibility of being being on the CEO, the president, the owner. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I've been saying this for probably almost 2 years now, and I believe we're going to begin to start seeing the effects of that, okay? Now, When I say poor is a mentality, you're not poor, you're broke. I have to make the connection to Jim Farley, who's the CEO of Ford. And Ford is right now going through some challenges along with GM and Stellantis and this United Auto Workers union strike. And essentially the amount of money that they would want is too great a sum, or else the company would face bankruptcy. And they don't want to do that. Again, or actually I take that back. They don't want to do that. Whereas I think Chrysler and GM went bankrupt. Ford didn't. Because Ford did take the bailout. But we're going to talk about that in greater detail on the other channel. But essentially, Jim Farley for 2022 had a total compensation that didn't include stock options of nearly $22 million. And I'm sure, the number two, the COO, the CFO, all the C-suite executives, they probably make up a fair amount of money in income. And I would have to say that they're not poor. No way. I would have to say that Ford isn't. But again, being poor is a mentality. Therefore, their rebuttal, their response to the workers is, we can't meet your demands because we can't afford to pay that. And I think the truth is that in a sense they can't, because they won't reallocate funds away from those who make millions and millions of dollars every year to keep the company alive. That's that poor mentality. But in actuality, they're broke because they just ain't got it, okay? But the reason why they ain't got it is because they're putting it in other places. So again, by paying these folks hundreds of millions of dollars collectively, they're going to cut off their nose to spite their face and could potentially just see this whole thing come crashing down. You thought that supply chain disruptions were a nightmare for the automotive industry, and seeing parking lots full of Ford Super Duties and F-150 pickup trucks unable to be sold because they didn't have the required semiconductor chips to complete the build. This is going to be worse because they're not going to make them. They're not going to be made. The parts are not going to be made. I myself, my wife, she has a 2021 Jeep Wrangler that needs a new rear differential covered under warranty, but the part is on order. They have no expected date, and she's been without a vehicle for going on 2 weeks now, and they're not going to provide a loaner vehicle, and we don't know when we're going to get it back. Meanwhile, we have to continue to pay for it and pay the payment, pay the insurance, and we don't get to use the vehicle. So yeah, first world problems, right? But the simple fact of the matter is that I expected this to happen, because the path and the road that we were going down since the beginning of the pandemic really only led to this possible outcome, and this is only the beginning, in my opinion. Now, with that being said, now, if you haven't already, is going to be the time to make sure you are in a sound and secure financial position and situation, because what happens next is literally anybody's guess, but more than likely the odds are what happens next, things are going to not be great for the majority, especially if you're part of the mass majority of the minority that is poor, or at least mentally poor and physically and monetarily broke. If your bank account is low, if your constantly getting overdraft and non-sufficient fund and fees hit on your bank account. If you're utilizing services that allow you to get an extra $100 before payday, these are signs that you are broke. Okay. But the thing is are you broke because you don't make enough money, or are you broke because your money's going to the wrong places? Because I don't think that Ford isn't making enough money, but I do think that their money may be going to the wrong places. And there's a fair amount of greed associated with this that is going to prevent them from reaching some form of negotiation sooner rather than later. That could affect us all in some way, shape, or form. And I mean, you got to think, when you have one of the largest companies in the world, but biggest in this country, United States of America, that is crippled and takes a knee, you got to realize that that's going to have rippling and lasting domino effects in our economy. So if you're broke, possibly because you're poor mentally, then maybe it's time you take a step back. And yeah, in one of my last videos, I said, you know, let's go ahead and say it out loud that we're not going to be broke, we're not going to be poor, we're not going to live paycheck to paycheck, we're not going to struggle, we're not going to be in poverty, we're not going to we're not going to do that anymore. Because I think if you say it, if you write it down, if you type it, if you save it somewhere, if you think about it, if you mean it, then these manifestations can provide you with the intent to intentionally get out of the situation that you're in, that you desire to free yourself from and separate yourself from as you move towards a much better situation. And that's not the only way, granted, and also working isn't the only way either. However, we do have to work on something or a few somethings and be smart about what we do, be deliberate and intentional, and most importantly, find ways to increase and maximize our income. For instance, let me give you a scenario that I came across yesterday, and that is no longer being paid or no longer receiving the hours to be paid what you essentially would require to cover your necessities and your budget and your expenses. And if you can't get the hours necessary, then your alternative would be to cut back, for sure. Let's always find ways to cut back and lower our overhead, reduce our spending, and tighten our budget. But instead, all right, well, if my hours are set, then how do I make more per hour? For instance, let's just say you're maxed out at 40 hours. Okay, great. I work for a company, they give me 40 hours, that's it. No overtime, but I get 40 hours, guaranteed. You're in a great spot, because a lot of people aren't in that situation. Maybe you have benefits and other perks, but in order to improve on that situation, then we need to figure out, how do we level up so that we can then make more per hour for these 40 hours? And that's just a basic, simple, 30,000 foot view. Way of looking at the situation without getting too specific and deep diving into it, which if you guys would like to, then let me know. We can do that on a future video. But at the end of the day, I think we are on the road and the path of increased financial and economic challenges that are not going to be solved by our government or by the companies and corporations that you work for, because of their high levels of greed, their high levels of debt, high level of fear and uncertainty in the economy and in the markets right now. And we are going to have to take control. Otherwise, we are going to be broke and then potentially poor mentally. And once you get to that point, then it's hard to get out of that. So I want you guys to be motivated to do better. Motivated to go out there and get what you want and get what you need. Thanks for watching. See you guys later.